leave it to Mark motherfucking Hamill to make hoods and homeless beards look awesome. Hello everyone, welcome to my review of the hardest to review movie of the year, Star Wars The Last Jedi. There's got to be a purpose as to why you clicked on this video, is to just get a little input without delving too much into the minutia of what this movie is all about. But it continues the adventures and the saga of these brand new characters inducted into the new storyline of Star Wars currently going on with some of the classic characters from that original trilogy. And besides that, I really don't know exactly how to break down the plot here, except that it picks up where Episode 7, The Force Awakens, left off, of having Rey be taught by Luke Skywalker the ways of the Force, whereas the Resistance is still trying to fight back against the First Order, who still are trying to rise from the ashes of the Empire. That's primarily what you need to know. In fact, this movie is so secretive in its plot that even the opening crawl doesn't tell you much. Because usually the opening crawl for these Star Wars movies, they kind of give you a little preface as to what happened right before you jump into the action. This, if I'm not mistaken, this opening crawl says nothing. I mean, it's just like 3 paragraphs of shit we already knew. So I'm like, wow, you really are holding everything close to the chest until the very first frame of the film. And as soon as the film gets going, it's clear that the tone was going to be a little darker, because this is meant to be the sequel to the first film that was brimming with life, trying to infuse some new energy into the Star Wars mythology, into the franchise after the disastrous prequels. So The Last Jedi is going to be taking that into a much more nuanced and human direction, and kind of making things a little bit much more dire for our central characters. So I'm like, okay, cool. But what's also interesting is that even from its first 15 to 20 minutes, where we're dealing with this really cool action set piece, it kind of strikes this balance where it's like with the Force, it's going to be a little darker, there's going to be casualties, there's going to be a cinematography and a robust sense of the way it's filmed and the way it's portrayed, but it's still going to have its moments of levity, really great humor, sometimes even self-aware humor that I really loved Rian Johnson's attention to some of the details for these characters to make him human, is to kind of make him self-aware of what's going on around him, even with this melodrama that's happening within the Force and all that stuff. That's not, I'm not using melodrama in the bad sense, but it's just that it takes on so much heavy stuff about legends and mythology that even some characters make really relatable remarks. Like, you're probably thinking something in your head while you're watching the scene, and then you have another character be like, da-da-da, what you exactly were thinking. So I thought that was really cool and a really awesome way to kind of bring in the audience onto this adventure of having Rey be taught by Luke, being taught by the ways of the Force, while at the same time exploring some of the things that have to do with characters from the previous film, some of which to even address some issues that some people probably had about that first film. Of course, the biggest controversy that The Force Awakens was able to kind of rile up from not only casual moviegoers but even some hardcore Star Wars fans was how likely it was that Force Awakens was a remake of A New Hope, down to some of the really stark similarities. And an awful lot of people, even myself included, were a little scared that Last Jedi was just going to be Empire Strikes Back all over again. There are some similarities. I'm afraid that there are some scenes that could be argued to be mere reflections of some scenes taken from Empire Strikes Back. It gets the conversation going, especially between me and my girlfriend as we were driving home. We were like, oh, that scene was kind of like that scene. And we were kind of like comparing and contrasting how these characters took these journeys, and they were able to find that little MacGuffin with this other character to kind of push them forward and become who they're meant to be, or to do the things that they needed to do. But it, as a very avid and detail-oriented movie aficionado, myself at least, I feel like there are certain scenes that I think I personally would have liked to have tweaked to get away from Empire Strikes Back, because there are some similar films, and I think that's one of my qualms with the film, is that there are certain scenes that there's no way, it's almost distracting in a way. You look at the scene and be like, that kind of reminds me of Empire Strikes Back, and I'm not exactly how sure I feel about this scene reminding me of Empire Strikes Back. Once you get past that, there are other little interesting things that they did in this movie that I was like, okay, that was actually different than I was expecting, or rather unique, or rather cool and complex. Something that they do with pretty much the entire battle between the First Order and the Rebellion. Again, no spoilers, you don't have to worry, but there's an interesting kind of cat and mouse thing happening with the two of them for those two factions for the majority of the film that I thought was rather interesting, rather cool, of how they were kind of dealing with tactics and figuring out the situation, because it's a different situation that you're normally accustomed to. In a film that's titled Star Wars, the overall arc for the Resistance versus the First Order, a little bit different than what you're probably accustomed to, at least until the very end, where it goes a little traditional, but at the same time it makes up for cool set pieces and awesome action sequences that yeah, sure, heavy use of CGI, but nothing that looks a little too gratuitous. It looks a little bit much more nuanced than you're usually accustomed to in other big flashy blockbuster films. Then jumping from that over to the more dramatic stuff that's happening between Kylo Ren, Rey, and of course some of our mainstay characters from the original trilogy, Princess Leia, and the man of the fucking hour, or in this case the movie, the 2.5 hours, Luke Skywalker, played by Mark Hamill, who I think if this was not a Star Wars movie and was like a straight up drama or something, I think he could be a contender for a Best Supporting nomination at least, because he steals the show in this film. They make sure that he gets his due desserts, or whatever the phrase is, after the shitty thing they kind of did with him in The Force Awakens, where they were hyping him up, and he only shows up in the last fucking frame of that movie. They more than make up for that in this film, where he is in the majority of the film, and almost every scene that he's in, he steals it, almost making it seem like those 30 years almost didn't pass. I mean, yeah, the 30 years passed in a physical plane, but not in an emotional one, where we still see that we see different shades of Luke. We see Luke the Master Jedi, we see Luke the hermit that's stuck on this island, and then we see the Luke from Return of the Jedi with that brimming optimism, all kind of compiled into one, where Hamill is able to deliver this performance that's able to capture those three different eras and kind of being able to elicit them to different aspects of the scenes that he's in. And holy shit, he was probably one of the best, if not the best thing about this film. And he was able to kind of anchor it all together, to where even some of the other things that's happening with Rey, training her skills, and at the same time trying to figure out what happened in the past between Luke and Kylo, and then Kylo's take on the whole situation and how he kind of fits into this whole story, was really cool and interesting. And then it hits that third act, and then the third act stuff gets even much more stronger on an emotional level, that I was like, yes, this is cool. What would have been cooler is that there's some occasional beats that they kind of skip over. In fact, when we get more introduced, or reintroduced in this case, with Luke, there's a little something from Force Awakens that I think I would have loved to have seen Luke's reaction to, and I was like, damn, it's a shame, because they literally cut away. And it's a shame, because there's certain other aspects about the film that I think could have been trimmed a little back, because I will admit the movie's a little too long. When they announced that this was going to be the longest Star Wars movie at 2 hours and 32 minutes, I was like, I really hope that works in favor of the film, because I could easily see that bloating the film a little bit, and it did. Especially when you get the majority of your minority characters and put them on a side quest mission that was, in my opinion, just a little preachy. When you got Finn, this girl Rose, who happens to be an Asian woman, and then another character who also happens to be a minority. I thought that was just the butt of a joke, and I was like, ugh, does nobody else see this? But they put him on this mission that was just a little preachy of some of the things that are going on right now with 2017. So I was like, okay, whatever, you know, it doesn't bug me, but yeah, I could easily understand why it would bug some other people. If you were to have trimmed that entire little subplot, I think the movie could have been a little bit much more compact and told in a much more streamlined kind of plot, and therefore this whole stuff with Kylo and Rey and Luke Skywalker would have been like the driving force, no pun intended, of this film, and it would have kind of hit that punch just a little harder, at least personally for me. Still, considering that was another issue that I had with the film, once those credits start rolling, and of course John Williams' score kind of rises above the horizon there, and it just sails into the galaxy, as it always does, I felt like, you know what? If I find the time for it, this might be a movie that's warranting a second viewing, because there's certain little things that are kind of put into the framing or put into certain details with the characters or whatever that I think I felt like I could have missed. And almost no other filmmaker would have been attentive to this kind of detail. However, I will leave with these closing thoughts, is that I do think that there were some things overlooked, like I said, that reaction by Luke that I would have wanted, or an explanation behind another character that was kind of overlooked, and I feel like maybe in the third movie they'll do some more explaining with that. They do have a broad opportunity to do that, but at the same time, it would be a little bit interesting, to argue whether or not they should go through with explaining that particular character. Only time will tell. All I know is that at this moment, I think I could have loved this movie a little bit better, because there were some fatigue with the 2.5 running hour time that I think could have been trimmed, and some things being overlooked, or some things kind of being put in there for the sake of being a Star Wars movie. C-3PO and R2-D2, they're literally in this movie for like 2 seconds, and I just don't understand why they're still here. I think at this point we need to move on from the old and get into the new, and without going into spoilers, the movie is kind of self-aware of that, and I think it's going in a really broad and interesting direction with that notion, and I'm looking forward to it. So I'm going to be giving Star Wars The Last Jedi a very, very, very high, enthusiastic, and recommendable 8 out of 10. Did I just say that really recommendable? I'm tired. My head is foggy from all the driving and all the chaos of trying to get to this movie theater on time, because it was really, really fucking stressful. That and the road to get to this movie without being spoiled, and I'm very thankful to have achieved that, and I'm hoping that you guys did as well, and hopefully you guys were saturated by this review without jumping into any spoilers, and I'm hoping that I didn't do that for anybody. So if you have seen Star Wars The Last Jedi, please let me know in the comments what you guys thought of the film. Spoiler free, do not be a dick and ruin it for anybody else. Also, let me know what were your guys' experience going into the movie, either Thursday night or Friday night opening day. Let me know of you guys' favorite Star Wars movie going experiences. And for the fuck of it, let me know what your guys' worst experiences were, because I feel like I was on the cusp of having one myself tonight. Maybe I'll save that up for another video. Until next time, guys, stay tuned for my spoiler discussion once you have seen the film. Make sure you support this video by hitting the like and share button. Of course, subscribe to the channel to support it and show your appreciation. Until next time, guys, may the Force be with you. Just take it! Just take the sauce, whatever it is.
You're so stressed out.
Wait. Let me go get a tomato. Let me get a tomato.
You're so I can't.
Fuck! No, what are you doing?
Sorry. You're...
Hold on. No, stop. Stop. You're getting in my head. Okay.